So a game came out recently that I have been extremely excited for what feels like over a year now, but I can't remember exactly when it was first announced, and that game is 12 Minutes. 12 Minutes is I'm actually not sure how to describe it really. Let's just start from where this game begins and show how it functions and what it looks like, because it's a pretty unique approach to the type of story that it's telling. So this game starts out with a brief look at how the character you're playing as looks like in the elevator before the perspective changes to a top-down camera angle. And this is how the entirety of the rest of the game is going to be played out. So after that, you make your way to your apartment after you walk around this outside hallway that has some pretty awesome flooring from The Shining. And once you enter inside, you're pretty much stuck there for the rest of the game. And the reason for that is because you're stuck in a time loop.
Hey babe, I'm home. Love you.
And that's pretty much the premise to this game. After that, it's basically up to you to try and figure out why you're stuck in this time loop and what to do about that. This is also a game that's done in real time, and basically what that means is that this time loop you're in has a set time of 12 minutes, which I don't think is actually 12 minutes, but it's a 10-minute cycle that you get to try and, uncover the mystery of this game. And as you go through each cycle, you slowly will start to unpack more and more of this story. I'm sure there's been a bunch of different time loop stories out there that have been done before, but this one really reminded me the most of something like Source Code. That idea of getting a short time span to learn as much as possible before being forced out to live out that same loop again is a really fascinating one. Another aspect to it that I really liked was that this character was feeling the toll taken on him each and every time that the loop would start over. Whether that was from his own frustration of living that same 10-minute cycle over and over again. I mean, when you think about that, wouldn't you be a little frustrated if that happened to you? 10 minutes really isn't that long of a time. But also there are times when he is physically harmed by this cop character who plays a big role in the game, and that will take him back to the start of the loop as well. I think this is a good time to mention the cast of this game because it's pretty star-studded. Our two main characters, which are never given names, so I'll just refer to them as the husband and the wife, are voiced by James McAvoy and Daisy Ridley. And the cop character that shows up to the apartment about halfway into the 10-minute cycle is voiced by Willem Dafoe. It's pretty much impossible to not recognize Willem Dafoe's voice whenever you hear it, so there was never any doubt about who is voicing the cop, but the husband and wife characters really don't sound like McAvoy or Ridley at all. I'd imagine that they did that intentionally and were speaking a bit differently than they usually do, which basically means that they were speaking in an American accent, but they were still incredible the entire time. All three of them were great. One thing that you do miss out on by having that top-down perspective is that you never get to see the faces of these characters while they're speaking, so all of that emotion and character has to come from the voices, and there was never a moment in this game when I felt like there was something missing from not seeing those facial reactions. These always felt like fully realized characters that had a lot of history behind them, even though there was such a limited amount of time to work with, to know more about them. What I did love most of all about it though is that it had such a cinematic style to it. Maybe it's just a subconscious thing because of the actors that are involved, but this gave me such a similar feeling of watching a really intense movie that had all kinds of crazy twists and turns. And even though I was actively participating in that story, it still felt like I was watching it all unfold before me, and there were a few different times when my jaw physically dropped from where the story went, and I can't credit them enough for that. Executing the story that was so well written in this way that gave so much weight to everything that was happening. That's a really tough thing to do, and they definitely pulled that off. So yeah, I mean, I do strongly recommend this one, and if you do have Game Pass, this is pretty much a no-brainer to check out, even if it might not seem like your type of game. I think you should give it a shot. Now let's get into the spoiler talk because there is a lot to talk about here. So just jumping right into it, the cop that comes into your apartment is convinced that your wife is a murderer who killed her father 8 years ago, and he is demanding that she gives him this pocket watch that she kept from her father. This is where things can be initially a bit confusing because you have nothing to go on aside from the information given in this brief altercation in which your wife is close to saying where the watch is, but that's when you wake up back at the start of the loop. And at no point in this game are you given any kind of goal of what you need to do to break this loop or what you need to do to get more information out of your wife, so it can be pretty challenging. But moving on from that, eventually you find out through talking to your wife about the watch that she in fact did shoot her father once she found out that he was having an affair with her nanny. And after doing that, she fled with the watch until she met her husband on New Year's Eve, and she's been holding on to that secret ever since. And of course, in between finding all this information, there are some big moments in the game that you have to go through just a bunch of loops again and try to find more information. And you're used to this by now. You've probably been playing for a few hours, and the biggest moment kind of comes when you figure out that you have to get the cop to electrocute himself in the bedroom so you can handcuff him and interrogate him for more answers. There is some important info that you get here that's essential to the game, but the reason I wanted to mention this is because it felt like I spent spent half of the game drugging my wife with the sleeping pills and hiding in the closet waiting for the cop to fall down unconscious. I'm sure in totality it didn't take up that much time of my playthrough doing that over and over again, but it just felt like I had to do it 100 times, and not to mention all the times that I forgot to turn the light on and off in the bedroom, which is something you need to do so that the cop electrocutes himself, and that just forces you to start the loop all over again if you forget to do that. And in general though, this is such a cool game design. Like, even through those frustrating parts of you mess something up, I just think it's really, really cool. I mean, I've seen online that it's been compared to Majora's Mask, and I've played a little bit of that game, but not nearly enough to understand the comparisons with it. But again, just that idea of having this time loop and a specific amount of time in real time that you have to do anything is such an interesting way to experience a game, and I'm sure this isn't the last time that we're going to see this be used. So after some time again, and I'm sure a bunch of more loops that you go through, eventually you find out that your wife didn't actually kill her father because he didn't die from that initial gunshot. It was from somebody else who shot him again a few days later. So they then find out that the real killer was the child that her father had with the nanny, which of course means that the killer was the wife's half-brother. And once again, potentially after many more time loops, you find out from the cop that the nanny's name was Dahlia. And I just realized right now I didn't mention this, so kind of a big part of the story is that your wife is pregnant. That's where this time loop starts every time, and she's prepared a dessert to celebrate this news, and she also bought a present for the husband, which is a baby's onesie with the name Dahlia on it. And another big piece of info that we find through this is that Dahlia is the name of the husband's mother. So if you kind of start to put those puzzle pieces together, we do come to this big conclusion of the story, which is that these two characters, the husband and the wife, are actually half siblings, which also makes the husband the half brother who shot and killed the wife's father. Look, there were a lot of potential endings that were coming to my mind when I was progressing my way through this game, but this was never one of them. But of course, aside from just the craziness of that, this also raises some pretty big questions. And the game doesn't even end there, but let's go over a few of those questions first. How did neither of them know about this already? Also, if you killed somebody by shooting them, isn't that something that you probably wouldn't forget? I mean, the sibling thing is plausible. I mean, as sickening and as twisted as it sounds, it is something that could happen. I mean, at the very, very least, they're only half siblings, right? So, I mean, it could be worse, but it's pretty bad. I mean, it's not exactly like this, but that's essentially what could have happened with Luke and Leia if Luke had never gotten that ghost phone call from Obi-Wan just dropping the bomb on him that he had a sister. I mean, she clearly would have chosen Han over him anyway, but yeah, that's just a really dark way for this story to turn, especially with the added bonus of them having a baby together. I mean, at this point, before learning anything else about the story, that's just all extremely messed up. I mean, that in itself is crazy enough to be this big shocking ending to the game, but like I said, it does go farther than that. You do eventually start the loop once again, having found out all of this information, so of course the husband is just a complete mess, and the wife isn't even referred to as the wife anymore, but just as her. And after figuring out like what you have to do here again, you eventually get the pocket watch, and time starts to go backwards, and you end up in a room with the father who is talking to the husband about how he can't be in love with his half-sister. And this is where maybe some interpretation can differ for people that play the game. I do kind of think with this story though, there is a pretty definitive way that the story ends and how it goes, rather than having multiple possibilities based on interpretation, but I'm more than happy to be proven wrong about that. However, the way that it seems to end to me is that while talking to the father here in this room, it's pretty much proven that the entire game that has been taking place before this, with the time loops and the whole story about him having a kid with his wife and him killing his father, was just a fabrication in his mind. He's completely in love with this woman, but she just so happens to be his half-sister, which he didn't know about, so he's been imagining this future with her that he wishes he could have. And the reason for the cop sounding and looking like the father is because it is him, and he's coming into the room to stop him from furthering this fantasy of them together because it can't happen. No matter how in love with her that he is, she's still his half-sister, and nothing is ever going to change that. So of course, it would make sense why in his mind, he would have killed the father to kind of suppress the fact that they are related. And he also doesn't want to just simply accept this, so you kind of see him ponder whether he would maybe just go on with his life with her and not tell her the truth, and maybe they can still have like a happy happy life together. Or maybe he can tell her the truth and their love for each other is so strong that they'll persevere through this and they can still stay together knowing that they are related. But ultimately, the one way to actually beat this game and to end these time loops that are going on in his head for good is to accept that the reality is that they can't be together and they should not be together, and he needs to forget about her entirely. So through some kind of hypnosis from the father, he is made to forget about everything involving his half-sister and the time loops, and they can all just move on with their lives. And that's the game. So yeah, like I don't know exactly how in-depth this really was aside from me just, explaining everything or talking about everything that happens. But this is a story that is very in your face, and I don't think there's a ton left to the imagination. There are some really cool notes like how the paintings change throughout the time loop and the plant in the bedroom will start to die, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are some other hidden secrets around the game that I didn't even notice. There's also a few parts of the game that I'm still curious about that I couldn't really figure out like the purpose of, like the 2 ventilation shafts that didn't have anything in them. Did those have any kind of importance or were they just there for fun? Also, the shining flooring at the beginning, was there any kind of purpose for that, or was it just, there because Luis Antonio is a big fan of the movie? Did the paintings have some kind of importance that I didn't piece together? There's definitely some questions to be had with this game, some big ones, some small ones, but it's certainly a game that garners a discussion to be had about it, just like a really good movie does, because whether or not the interpretation of what went down are the same or not, I think the experiences that people have with it are going to be entirely different based on how they felt about the mechanics of the storyline and the repetitiveness of the time loop and just, the story in general. And what's amazing is just how big of a world this sort of ends up feeling like when you're just stuck in this small apartment pretty much the entire way through. There's so much that I loved about this game and so much that I think will stay with me as this year gets closer and closer to the end. And with as many games that have been delayed until next year, I wouldn't be surprised if this one contends to be my favorite game of the year. I definitely want to play it again, and I want to see if I can get through it a lot faster now that I mostly know what to do, and also if it will have like a different feeling to it since I know the answers to everything already. I would love to hear your take on it if you've played it already too. I'm not sure if this will necessarily be a love it or hate it type of game, but I would be interested to know just how many people are willing to put in the time to finish the whole thing, because it can wear on you with every loop that goes by, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are just going to give up like at some point and just put the game down, never go back to it, maybe see some videos on how it ended, because it can be a lot. So all in all though, for all of the hype that I was putting on this game from the moment that it was announced to now, like finally getting to play it, I would say it easily surpassed all of my expectations, and it's one that I'm going to definitely remember for a very, very long time. So thank you all so much for watching this. I really do hope you enjoyed this. I know the game has been out for like a month or so already, so I'm sure if you wanted to check out a video like this about the game, you probably already have, and there's got to be hundreds of them out there by now, but I didn't want to stop that. I didn't want that to stop me from making this video because I believe this game is interesting enough to continue having conversations about it for years to come, and I suppose only time will tell on whether that's true or not. But yeah, I also just want to talk about stuff that I like, and this is a game that I really, really liked, really potentially loved, and I don't want to like, just because it's old, just because it's not technically relevant anymore, I don't want that to stop me from making these kinds of videos. So, they might not always be on time per se, but I don't want that to hinder like me doing what I want to do. So expect more of these. Like if there's a really cool game that I didn't play from a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it doesn't matter. I just want to talk about them. I want to play them. And I'm sure there's still a discussion to be had about any of these games at any point in time, especially if they are, worthy of the kind of discussion that I think this game is worthy of. But yeah, aside from all of that, I hope you're all doing well out there wherever you are in the world. It really means so much to me that you decided to click on this video, and I hope you want to do that like some more. But if you're just stopping by for this one, I really do appreciate that, and I hope you had a good time watching it. So have a great day out there, everybody, and until the next one, take care.